computer out there. You guys are live.
Still got 3 minutes.
I can look it up. Hold on.
You know, I believe since they have the date, I don't know if that's the right date.
Right. Oh, that's not
I
right.
just scroll down.
30.
I wonder if it's an iOS thing, because we're on Apple. Let me do this, let me do a different browser.
You looked one too many times, they cut you off.
No, I was hitting refresh a lot this afternoon, because I want to see what the note was.
Yeah.
But it's like cached in there or something. Yeah, so it's updated on this browser, it wasn't updated on Chrome.
That's interesting.
Let's see, look at it.
You don't let that kid drive yet.
Refresh 2 or 3 times. Still shows
You don't let
11:27.
that kid drive yet.
Wisconsin, I do. He's got to run.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
Right. That's right.
I can share. I don't know. That's why I have to bring this computer.
I forgot when I left the house.
Oh. Here. We can share. Because it doesn't. Like, I don't know. Just for that's okay.
I think I can see that. I actually can see from here. That's exciting. There's nothing attachments.
There's nothing. If you want to see this.
I'd like to call to order the Special Board of Education meeting for USD 464 for Monday, November 30th. Before we ask for approval of the agenda, I'd just like to welcome all attendees and those who are live on the streaming service. Now, tonight's meeting is intended to allow for public comment on the board's strategic reopening plan and November 18th superintendent's recommendation. We all believe that in-person education and activities is important, but recognize that there is a process to update the plan based on the information as it develops. Tonight's agenda provides for possible action on the plan. Opportunity will be provided for all viewpoints to speak. With that in mind, I would just ask that everyone remain as professional as possible. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Holy cow, I'm gonna give it to Karen, I guess. I moved, Karen seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your right hand. All right, motion carried. With that, we'll move on to the patron comments. As noted in the public announcement, you'll be allotted 3 minutes to present your opinion. Please do not direct anything directly at any particular board member or student. We've had 10 people sign up, so there'll be time for everyone to speak. Mr. Vice President's going to help me keep track of the 3 minutes. I'm just kind of going in order, but I did offer the Tonganoxie Education Association the opportunity to speak first. So, Kelly, do you want to come forward?
I'm the latest one.
Good. It's fine.
My name is Kelly Wyatt, and I'm a resident of Tonganoxie. I will be speaking tonight from 2 different perspectives. First, as an individual teacher. Secondly, as TEA president and representative. I teach 8th grade
your applications. Working with students in person is the best possible way to achieve success, just as you said. Students and teachers thrive on in-person contact. However, our current situation makes in-person instruction dangerous, especially over the next few weeks. Many of our students traveled over Thanksgiving holiday. We have students who traveled to or have visitors from Lake of the Ozarks, Texas, Arkansas, Wisconsin, and Florida, just to name a few. Many of our students also participated in large gatherings over the holiday. It would be irresponsible and dangerous to have in-person classes in this situation. Because of this, I am grateful that the district made the tough decision to temporarily go to remote instruction. I believe it is important to listen to the experts when it comes to the safety of students, staff, and community. The Leavenworth County Health Department provides regular updates on the number of positive COVID cases in the county, and the CDC continues to warn us not to travel and to avoid large groups. In addition to masks, the most important safety precautions are social distancing and staying away from large groups in confined spaces. Neither of these is possible in our classrooms. Students rotate through my classroom, 27 at a time, every 9 minutes. They sit shoulder to shoulder while they are in my room. Social distancing cannot happen in that environment. Since you aren't there to experience it firsthand, I provided a picture of my classroom. And as you can see, my students sit shoulder to shoulder. Now they're kids. They wear a mask. It's like this a lot of time. It's a constant pull your mask up. Or it's hey, or it's these are things that happen in my classroom, and it's a constant fight, I think you'd say, to keep the mask on. We are professional and dedicated educators, and we are frightened. Teachers are worried about the safety of our students, our families, and ourselves. We are stressed from worrying about safety. We are stressed by the need to cover classes for colleagues out sick. And we are stressed from worrying about protecting our families from exposure to the virus. With increasing numbers of COVID cases and the tendency of students to travel and risk exposure, the only reasonable and responsible thing to do is to use our available resources to teach and learn remotely. All right, now, as TE President and Representative, I want to share with you the position statement developed by TEA regarding the district's response to COVID-19. This statement was shared with teaching staff via a survey, with 115 teachers only, responding. 90% expressed support for this message, and that message is, TEA supports any board decision that takes students, staff, and community safety into full account, includes full transparency in terms of COVID impacts at the county, district, and building levels, and is in line with the guidance of health professionals. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the list, I mean, this is no particular order. The only one that I had some kids that wanted to speak last, so they're going to be on the last. But Gretchen Meitler.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gretchen Meitler. I do live in Tonganoxie. I am just outside of city limits. Unfortunately, in August, we chose to take our 2 younger children out of the school district and do a remote program somewhere else. My 3rd grader now had some extreme emotional times in those first few weeks while they weren't in school. We decided that we couldn't sit there and wait and wonder when it was going to happen. When are they going to shut down the schools? When are we going to have to go remote? And will it be like it was in March? So we made other choices. On the flip side, I also own a daycare here in town. Normal day, 40 school-age kids. When they made the announcement that they were going to go remote, I gave all my parents the opportunity to choose our program or take your kids home. 30 of the 40 parents chose to keep their kids with us. In March, nobody had devices. We went out and spent thousands of dollars and had lots of donations from our families to bring devices into the building. We brought in internet at one location and had to get wireless devices from the other location. At that time, very minimal class time, very minimal streaming. It worked for us then. I'd like to thank Mr. Mann and his staff today for assisting us and everybody else who was involved, for allowing those 30 kids to come back into the school. There's no way that we can continue this string. Only one of the children in that group of 30 was provided a hotspot. I ask you, let the parents choose if they want their kids to be in the classroom, on the mat, on the court. Let it be their choice. Because right now, USD 464 cannot support all of the students who need connectivity to remote into the school and participate and receive a quality education. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Duffett?
Hi, my name is Derek Duffett. I'm a senior here at Tommy Knoxville High School. I believe that all sports should be allowed to have their full seasons. I believe this because many kids have been working their whole lives to accomplish big goals in their respective sports. Also, many families, including my own, are not as financially lucky and aren't able to pay the outrageous prices that colleges charge. With that being said, sports are a great way to earn a scholarship and allow these kids to be able to take their education to the next level. Another reason that I believe sports should be allowed is because they bring kids together who may have never known each other, and it builds a bond that can last forever. It also helps take kids off the streets, out of jail, away from drugs, and a world of other bad decisions that can be made. When it comes to COVID, we as a community have had a very low number of cases. We've been taking every single precautionary measure we've been told to follow. We've had 3 separate practices with 3 separate groups to keep kids away from each other. We wear masks when we practice, we wear masks at school, we wear masks everywhere. We've done everything we've been told to do. It would just really hurt if we've done everything we've been told to follow and just still be told that we can't play. According to the CDC, people in the age group 15 to 24 have only had 418 deaths that were COVID related. I feel it is absurd to be shutting down sports over something with such a low death toll. To put that in perspective, there are roughly 8.5 million car crash deaths from the same age group per year, according to AAAfoundation.org. I feel if we do not freak out and just walk everywhere with such a high number of car crash deaths, then there's no reason to shut down sports over the virus. That is why I believe all sports should be allowed to play. I really hope my speech has influenced your decision.
Thank you. Brandon Martin?
Hello, my name is Brandon Martin. I'm a senior here at Tonganoxie High School. My family and I just moved over to Tonganoxie this year, and I play football and wrestling. Since I was 8 years old, I have been wrestling. It has been a huge part of my life, and I would not be the same person I am today without it. If we are allowed to play this winter, I promise that we will follow every single precaution, whether it's putting our masks up during practice, drinking out of separate water bottles, or having a certain amount of kids in the room. This will more than likely also be my last wrestling season, and I pray to God that last year was not my last time working with the mat. From having a certain amount of people in the room, sports benefit us in many ways, not just physically, but mentally as well. They give us something to take our minds off of whatever is going on in our lives and brings people together. They push us to do better in school as we have to stay eligible or we cannot play. If sports were to not happen, I truly feel a lot more kids will be slacking off during school and students' grades will drop. I know this year has been very crazy and it's not normal at all, but I ask each of you board members to please think about how much this means to both the kids and families that are involved in these sports. Thank you.
Jeremy Martin?
Hi, my name is Jeremy Martin. My wife Michelle and I moved to Tonganoxie earlier this year after 20 years in Piper. We have a senior named Brandon, she just met, and a 7th grader named Brady. My wife and I both grew up in a rural town of 400 people where everybody knows your name and everybody looks out for each other. We made the decision to move out here because we believe Tonganoxie the same way, and we wanted our kids to experience a community similar to where we grew up. A place where you know your neighbors and the rest of the community would do anything for anyone and always want what's best for the kids and the community in general. With that in mind, I'm here to ask you to allow winter activities to continue and get the kids back in school like the rest of the state is trying to do activity-wise. Earlier today, I sent each of you several examples of various COVID-19 waivers that other schools across the state are using to keep activities open. I believe that there's no reason we can't do the same thing here. Put the decision in the hands of the parents. Let them decide if they want to allow their kids to participate and or go into in-person schooling. I can speak on behalf of the procedures put into place by the wrestling staff and coaching staff here at Tonganoxie. They have the safety of wrestlers, coaches, and the families of our student athletes are of the utmost importance. The staff has implemented smaller practice groups, mandatory masks for everyone in the room, they use an auxiliary gym, and strict sanitation procedures. Tonganoxie student athletes are safest at school and on the mat, not out running around all over the city trying to find a pickup game of basketball or wrestling out of state with their club and bringing all that back to our community. With no fans, according to Keisha, no in-person schooling, and all the mitigation strategies put in place by the coaching staff, I believe the safest place for my kids is on the wrestling mat. Just like we found a way to continue playing football while being on a high-risk activity in yellow status, we should do the same thing for winter activities. I would ask that we please find a way to throw out the numbers from Lansing and Leavenworth and use our local numbers. That's what other school districts are doing. That's what Piper did. They're using just their school district zip code numbers. If we did that, our positivity rate would be cut in half, if not 2/3. The current Leavenworth County positivity rate for 11/27 isn't even 15% yet. The community number is above 15%, but the actual Leavenworth County number is not. In fact, hot off the presses, I'm not sure what you've seen or not, they just released today's number a couple hours ago. Leavenworth County dropped from 14.36 to 13.01, and the community dropped from 15.89 to 14.47. Both of those numbers would have us back in school and playing sports. Let's figure out a way to do right by these kids and work their butts off and done everything we've asked. Thank you for your consideration for serving our community during these crazy times and for letting me speak. Thank you.
Coach Jones.
Hello there. My name is Phil Jones. I'm the varsity boys basketball coach and PE teacher at the middle school. First off, I'd like to thank you for reconsidering this decision that was made a few weeks ago. I know it's been a long 2 weeks for everyone in this room. I've had plenty of sleepless nights, and I'm sure most of you guys have had as well. I cannot imagine being in your guys' shoes. The idea of a virus completely changing the way we live was probably not on your radar when you ran for a school board seat. The decision tonight should not be made lightly, as there are many factors that should be weighed, and rightfully so. I'm here tonight to advocate for winter sports resuming. I'm speaking to you on behalf of my program, the girls basketball program, and the wrestling programs. As coaches, we have discussed at length how our seasons were going to look. Every single time, it was centered around how we can play our sport safely through a pandemic. Our discussion about player safety began over the summer and has continued all fall. My undergraduate degree is in sports medicine. Injuries and prevention of injury is always in the back of my mind. I approach COVID-19 the same way. How can I continue teaching and coaching in a safe and effective manner? What precautions must be taken to keep everyone healthy, both players and staff? I tried my best to keep up with Keisha's for our meeting last Tuesday. Luckily, I've got some very passionate parents that were keeping me in the loop as I was able to stay on top of it and go over details once I got home. I wouldn't say I was surprised by Keisha's ruling on how winter sports should play out across the state. However, I was ecstatic to find that the state deemed it safe enough to play a full winter season starting later this week. I believe the state had to weigh many options and heard from plenty of experts before determining winter sports could be played and continued safely. If state experts believe transmission through sport is low and can be played safely, I see no reason why we cannot continue winter sports. I've heard from many of my players. I've heard everything from I will either transfer, skip school ball to play AAU, or that sports are the only reason keeping me in school. Is that what we really want as a district? As an educator first, I'm heartbroken to hear a kid say that, only that they are only here to play a sport, but I understand it. It took me 24 years on this earth before I found my purpose in life. I stand before you fulfilling my purpose to be a teacher to young men, setting an example, and to be a role model, and doing all that while coaching the game of basketball. Sports and extracurricular activities are usually seen as who wins and who loses, but there's so much more than a W or an L. Sports teach kids how to be accountable, reliable, and overcome adversity, just to name a few. Do I have fears about us resuming sports? Sure. I've got family members that are in the high risk category. However, I'm not going to live my life in fear. I know not having a season will result in greater damage on the kids and coaches. I know my players understand the magnitude of this situation. This team is a special one. If they have something to play for, they will not be going out to parties on the weekend. They won't be gathered in large groups. They know how precious little time they have left to wear the T on their chest. As a state, we're in a very different situation than we were last spring when everything got shut down. I'll never forget driving back from Salina with several of the senior boys, and we just got done watching 4A state basketball tournament. A place where I believe we will be this March.
Coach, we are at 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Carrie Duffin.
Hello, thanks for listening to all of us. My name's Carrie Duffin. I have got 3 children out here in the school system. Derek, who's a senior, Peyton, who's a freshman, and Dax, who's in the 7th grade. We uprooted our kids after 30 years of living in the Piper area because we were adamant about having our kids in school full-time. They have shown studies, kids are falling behind in every part of education by not being in the classroom, having the one-on-one attention. I can attest to this myself with my 7th grader. He is not a school fan, he has to study, and he has to try. He has a harder time focusing at home, trying to stay focused on a computer as opposed to having a teacher there to help direct him or answer any questions that come up at that time. One of my kids, both my boys have been wrestling since they were the age of 5. They have been in sports. Derek would love to be able to get a college scholarship because we financially cannot afford to pay for him to go to a college, not a big college. So we are asking to please consider allowing these kids to go back into school, stay on the mats, basketball courts, whatever sport it is that they have done their whole life. And this is a lot of these kids that are here in the hallway, this is their last year to compete in a team sport. Some of them will never again step foot on a court, a wrestling mat, whether it's cheerleading, dance. This will be their last chance to compete with their friends and their teammates. And if you look at the numbers they showed in Leavenworth County, the total number of deaths due to COVID is 30. Only 1 death is under the age of 55, and it was a 20-year-old. Everybody else in that was 55 and above. But I guarantee you, all these people that are 55 and above are still going to the grocery store. They are not having their groceries delivered. They are going out and shopping. I feel it is our responsibility to give all of these kids the chance to get the best education they can and compete their sport that they love with their friends. Suicide rates are higher. Depression rates are higher. The number of antidepressants that have been prescribed since COVID started have dramatically went up because kids are suffering by not getting to compete in their sport or be in the school classroom where they can socialize somewhat. I beg and plead of you, as a mother that I work in healthcare, please give these kids the opportunity to be successful in school and to be successful in their sport. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
to share. I don't think there's enough for everybody, but. I don't know if you guys will be able to hear me, but. First, I would like to thank you all for being willing to schedule a special board meeting tonight. My name is Nikki Beach. My husband and I are both THS alumni, and we have 2 sons. Our oldest graduated from THS in 2018. Our youngest is a senior this year, and he also happens to be a member of the boys basketball team. I'm here tonight to advocate for the importance of athletics to many of the kids in our community. I'm also here in support of on-site learning as well, but there are others here to speak on that. As Jeremy mentioned, I'd like to point out, as of today, our county is back in the yellow at 14.47%. I did some research and put together these charts here that you guys see. Are you guys all aware that we are the only district around who's keeping our kids from participating in athletics? Many of these other districts have gone remote as of today or are hybrid with very minimal time on site and are still allowing the kids to participate. Most all of these schools are also in areas which have higher COVID rates than we do in Tongi. For example, Miami County, which is home to 3 of the 5 schools on these charts who are still attending classes on site, is at a positivity rate of 24.14% according to KPHE. I called Miami County Health Department as I was curious as to why so many schools are attending on site. They have so many on site. I figured they must have a low positivity rate. However, it was contrary to that. I learned from the nurse in charge that they allow each school to determine their own gating as different areas experience different rates of spread. We see this happening here in Leavenworth County, where Leavenworth and Lansing make up the bulk of our county numbers, yet those school boards realize the importance of athletics and their students' mental well-being. And Leavenworth is actually still having on-site classes even though our county is in the red. The Acacia director himself said that these kids should be participating in athletics and that the school teams are the safest place for them as it serves as a type of bubble. If these kids are kept from participating here in Tongi, they will leave town to participate on a club team or in other activities where they are no longer in the bubble that they would have been on a school team. I understand there is concern of liability and also the athletes not following protocol outside of athletics. There are ways to remedy that instead of just putting a stop to it. I know some parents have presented you all with a copy of a waiver that parents could sign to release liability from the school. It has been looked over by both a medical and legal professional and is currently being used in a nearby district as has been approved by their attorney. To address the athletes not following the social gathering recommendations outside of school, I would suggest that there's a code of conduct made that the athletes will need to sign in order to prove they are willing to sacrifice some things to keep their bubble safe. At the beginning of the school year, when Acacia was slow recommending to go forward with fall sports, 464 was one of the first districts in the area to say, yes, we will play. How is it that when Acacia is now recommending to go ahead with winter sports, we are the only district around to say, no, don't do it? Every school has chosen to allow sports to continue. I have a hard time believing not one of these schools has looked into any legal problems that may come from allowing them in sports. In addition, contrary to what this abrupt halt of athletics is meant to do, not all kids are sitting at home. Now that our children have been forced to opt out of on-site learning, we should have the choice to opt into these activities that will help keep our kids in an environment that is safe and good for their mental health. We have parents willing to assume the risk of our kids participating, even going as far as sign a waiver. Coaches are willing to coach.
We're at 3 minutes.
Okay. And kids are willing to play.
Thank you. Rebecca Falgrim.
Thank you all for allowing me the time to speak. I'm advocating for children in the Tonganoxie School District to resume education in person. I've emailed all of you a wealth of medical literature regarding COVID-19 in schools. There are a few highlighted things I'd like to point out. Based on emerging data, schools do not appear to play a major role in COVID-19 transmission. To date, there have been very few documented cases in school. Of the few documented cases of school-associated transmission, these cases occurred outside of school or because of poor adherence to masking protocols. Current data shows that there is not strong evidence for transmission of COVID-19 from children to other children or from children to teachers. If infected, children less than 10 years of age are also less likely to transmit COVID-19. The impact of remote learning, social isolation, and the pandemic itself on children has been devastating to their physical and mental health. Lastly, academic performance has declined in students participating in remote learning. According to the CDC's considerations for operating schools during COVID-19, implementation should be guided by what is feasible, practical, acceptable, and tailored to the needs of each community. Tonganoxie is a unique community, and our strategic reopening plan should reflect that. I believe it is important to take CDC, KDHE, and Leavenworth County guidelines into consideration. However, I also believe these guidelines need to be re-examined and reinstated. Strategic reopening plans and gating criteria for schools nationwide are being reviewed and adjusted, and this must also occur within the Tonganoxie School District. The CDC states that the many benefits of in-person schooling should be outweighed against the risks posed by COVID-19 spread. CDC also says that it is critically important to develop strategies that can be revised and adapted depending on the level of viral transmission in the school and throughout the community. We know in-school transmission is extremely low and that community numbers are not necessarily reflective of our school system. We also know that the mitigation strategies we have put into place at the Tonganoxie School District are effective, and our students and staff are considered relatively safe within our school walls. I propose that when we re-examine our strategic reopening plan and gating criteria, we take into consideration what is occurring within our schools and not just what is occurring in the surrounding community. Updated November guidance from the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania states that in a setting of high community transmission, the schools that have already reopened for in-class instruction and avoided in-school transmission, certain strategies should be implemented to avoid reverting to online learning. These selective strategies might include keeping younger grades in school while temporarily reverting middle and high school age children to online learning. Given the information within our community and within our schools, immediately reinstating in-person education at the elementary school level seems like a plausible first step for the Tonganoxie School District. Thank you for your consideration.
Riley and Morgan.
Hello, my name is Riley Beach. I'm a senior on the boys basketball team. I'm here to represent all student athletes that are desired to participate in winter sports. For some of us, this is our last go around to play for our hometown. For some of us, this is our last opportunity to get the thrill of playing the sport we have put our blood, sweat, and heart into, and have made memories that will never be forgotten. We want to have the chance to do this one last time for most of us. That's all we got. We understand the thought process of being very careful with the decision, although it comes at a time and place where we have to push through and continue with our day-to-day lives. I'm assuming many of you are still working your normal jobs while adjusting to safety protocols. Us student athletes can do this as well. We have had many talks throughout our team about the importance of staying safe and healthy, and we know what it takes to have a complete and healthy season. Many of us need sports to stay focused and dedicated to keep our grades up, and I'm afraid that if we take it away, we will all struggle in the classroom. To finish up tonight, I would like to ask a rhetorical question to you board members. How many of you board members have a high school memory that you can cherish upon with your family and friends? Please don't take this away from your student body. Speaking for my brothers and I, we ask that you let us have a chance to play our season as scheduled.
Hi, I'm Morgan Brewston. I'm a senior on the girls basketball team. I'm a multi-sport athlete as well as a 4.0 student. As you can see, athletics and academics are both of extreme importance to me. I come here today knowing that you have a tough decision to make. I wanted to give you an athlete's perspective. We understand your concern to keep us safe. However, if any one of you board members come to our practice, you would find us practicing in small pods, social distancing, and wearing a mask while practicing, including while we scrimmage. We all use separate water bottles and do not take this pandemic lightly. If it is your request, all winter sport athletes will sign a COVID waiver to continue our extracurricular activities. If you look around our league, other schools are also remote learning while activities are ongoing. Taking away extracurriculars not only hurts a teenager's mental health, but also gives them less incentives to keep their grades up and follow proper CDC protocols. As young athletes, this is a critical growing point in our lives. This is where we learn teamwork, dedication, and perseverance that catapult us into our future endeavors. With all that being said, please let us play.
That concludes the patron comment portion of the meeting. I think we'll open it up like last meeting with discussion from the administration regarding COVID status, remote learning plans, and extracurricular activities.
This is the updated handout that I sent to you today. I just wanted to give you a physical copy just so you can follow along. And then it does have So on the back side, it does have some of the current numbers that has been requested, from both the board and from the community, as far as transparency, and those are our current numbers as of today. And then I'm just gonna hand this out while I have time, but this is the waiver that has been referred to on a number of occasions tonight. And on the back of the waiver that our athletic director gave me before the meeting, and there is some criteria on the back that he may refer to as we move forward. First of all, I want to thank, personally, I want to thank the student athletes here for their passion. I received a lot of emails from you. I read them all. I tried to reply to most of them, and it was hard to, because I think I got way behind, but that's beside the point. But you guys, there was a common thread, there was a common message, and it was basically, this is our senior year, and I want to play. I heard the same thing tonight. So I do appreciate that. I also am appreciative of a lot of the emails that I received from parents that were very passionate about not just athletics, but also about education for their students in general. So a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails that have gone on the last few days. And I know my board has also received a large number of the same correspondence. But I just wanted you to know that it meant a lot to be professional, to be high quality, high character. All those things was important. I've given this a lot of thought, as you probably already are aware. On the first recommendation, it's the one about going remote. I feel very strongly that it's just difficult for us to yo-yo back and forth between being remote, on-site, then back remote. I know the numbers, and I didn't have the numbers until I got here tonight. I see they dropped a little bit again, which, that's great news. Absolutely great news. I tried to write that in on the current numbers. It's the first time we've dropped below 15 in a couple of weeks, and I just, there's no guarantee that number won't go back up. We all know that. But after talking to the administrative team, I've talked to members of TEA, staff, they put a lot of effort into moving to remote starting today, and I appreciate that. And what we keep talking about, I know it's a huge inconvenience, but what we're talking about is 14 days of being in remote at the pre-K through 12. I also feel that we've made a lot of concessions, as was mentioned tonight by Gretchen. You were trying to work with students that don't have the connectivity. We're trying to work with those kids who need the special help through special education classes. The staff has stepped up. They're helping out wherever they can. We've got kids spread all out through the elementary. We have kids all over the middle school and high school that need our help in a special way, I guess is the best way to put it. So my recommendation obviously is that we stay with the remote through the Christmas or January 4th, just like the reopening plan, and to continue to monitor that information as we receive it. But and I also want you to know that we need to work on what that plan looks like. We need to know if we are going to make it a living document, what that means. Because we're, Tanya and I work on that, and so does the administrative team, but that's something that I think needs to be nailed down as we move forward, because we know that these numbers are going to they're going to drop a little bit, they're going to rise. We don't have a real good prediction on that. So that's the first one. The second one is with the activities. And I know that I shared this with you last week, so it's no surprise, but it is my recommendation to the Board of Education that we return to practice and activities starting tomorrow, and continue that through December, and continue to reevaluate that. And what I mean by that, and I listed my rationale. But the number one on my list is what happened Tuesday afternoon with Keisha, and with them, with the board of directors, and their moving forward with practice and activities as scheduled. That played a huge role for me personally. I think this information, and this is correct information, I looked it over, I talked to almost all these schools in the last, day or in the last couple days, and so this is very current. The Frontier League schools information is current, is very correct. The Leavenworth County information on here is very correct. And so I visited with all the Leavenworth County SUPs this morning for about an hour, and they're all in athletics and with practice as stated in this sheet. I personally feel, as an old coach, that the extracurricular activities is very, it's an extracurricular activity. It's very important in the lives of these people, these young people. I will never deny that. And I know that the parents are taking this on as a risk. So if the waiver is something that would help persuade your vote tonight, then, I would like for you to consider that. And then also I put in here that, that continue with athletics while remote is not placing athletics above academics at all. Having schools on site means 500 students in our high school, but when you have practice of smaller pods, it is so much safer than when you think of the big picture with 500 kids, trying to move through classrooms or being shoulder to shoulder, like Kelly mentioned in her classroom. But having an athletic practice school means 20 plus students. I trust our coaches. I trust our athletic director and our administration to do everything they can to reduce the risk and exposure. I really do. And I know that can be questioned, but I know these people are dedicated to make this happen. As I said, I'm a firm believer in the strength of extracurricular activities, and it helps the social well-being of our students. There's no doubt in my mind. And these kids have been through a lot through the COVID. Since last March, I can't even imagine what a lot of them have gone through. Karen asked a very good question today about our positivity rates, within our school. I shared that with everybody. The numbers are low. I mean, you cannot deny that they're low. Now I'm glad they are, because I think that we've taken all the precautions to keep those numbers down. And that's a testimony to our students and our staff. Also, I think we have to recognize this is a temporary decision. We're going to have to reevaluate this on a continual basis, as do all the schools that are involved in activities in the county and in the league. It's something that we just have to take a hard look at, especially, in my opinion, in December. Right when Christmas break starts, we really have to evaluate what things are going to look like in January. And maybe there'll be more guidance from Keisha, but I can't guarantee that. So that's my opinion. I'm asking you to. That is my recommendation at this point for the board, and with a lot of thought and that went into this, and I hope you respect that, and that's what I like to pass that along. I would like to have Cody and Mark Farrar come up for just a second. I think it's Mr. Altman. Did I see? Mark, if you wouldn't mind, just for the middle school activities. I'd like to turn this over first to Cody. I think, or you want to go Mark? I'm sorry, Mark first. He had a real quick statement he wanted to make to the board.
Real quick statement. I know I say this a lot, but thank you guys for doing a tough job. This isn't easy, and a lot of times it's not fun. It's more fun building a new high school, which we need to talk about soon because it's more positive. But I think that Mr. Feldkamp said it right. Our schools are doing things right. We are wearing masks. Our students and staff are being vigilant. We're doing a great job, and I think that's a testament to why our numbers in the school are pretty low. And that's not just timeouts. Schools across the country are doing the same thing, and they're seeing that it works. I also, real quick, would like to say that there was an article in the Kansas City Star today, and the article was about the COVID slide. Since March, kids across the country are experiencing academic and emotional deficits. We don't want to lose sports. Nobody wants to lose sports. And COVID is the enemy. Make no mistake, it's dangerous, and it's a bad thing for America, for the world. But there's a secondary enemy for school-age children, and it's the COVID slide. It's depression, it's anxiety, it's losing social connections, and when that happens, it changes the trajectory of their future. And these are things that we need to consider. We put together some steps that we think will help with maintaining winter sports. Cody's going to talk a little bit about that.
I'll echo what Mr. Farrar said. Thank you to you guys. I know you guys have put a lot of time into this and energy and heard a lot of voices. Thank you to everyone that's here tonight and for speaking up for what you believe in and what's important to this community. The first thing I want to address quickly is the misconception that if we reinstate athletics, that we are putting it above academics. That's something that I've heard a lot over the last couple of weeks is how can we reinstate athletics when we're not in the building academically. And Mr. Feldkamp hit on this a little bit. We're measuring risk in everything we do right now. We're measuring what the risk is and we're weighing it out. And being on site with 500 students in a high school building, in a high school campus, the risk of that is different than bringing 20 kids in for an athletic practice. And the protocols that we have in place, we've worked directly with the county health department, and we're at a point where the county health department is telling us if you wear masks throughout practice, which we are now doing, no matter what, if you have a positive case in practice, we would still consider nobody there a direct contact. That is what our county health department is telling us. That if you wear masks throughout practice, we wouldn't even consider someone at practice a direct contact, even if you had a positive case there the entire time. So the risk of bringing 20 to 30 kids in for a practice and what our county health department is telling us about the measures we are putting in place is significantly different than having 500 kids on site for classes all day. And so I just want to emphasize that reinstating athletics is not putting athletics above or prioritizing it above academics. It's simply saying the risk is different. And that's a risk that we're willing to take right now. So that was my first thing I wanted to address.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
So, I think I know the answer to this, but the CASHA rules that came out.
Yes.
I suspect that most of that we were already doing. Is that, except for as it relates to staff and students, right? There's the whole, you have bands and stuff like
Right.
that. But is that an accurate statement that because I don't see much, I didn't see anything in there that led me to believe that, okay, it's adding, if anything, on what I'm hearing and talking to some coaches is, we are already doing maybe more procedures or more things than what even the CASHA baseline is, which is basically a blanket across the entire state, no matter what your community numbers are. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the board of directors meeting, what they passed last week through CASHA, the two primary ways that's going to impact us and take what we were doing to another level is, number one, the no fans. When CASHA said no spectators from December 1st to January 28th, in the fall we were practicing just limiting attendance, not saying no fans, no spectators. And so that's going to be a big one that is pushing it beyond what we were already doing.
Right, but if you look at just the student, because particularly given the challenges we faced with substitutes.
Yes.
And since a lot of the coaches are also teachers, that seems like a risk there with regards to maintaining, what they're doing throughout the day.
Okay.
Is it accurate to say between that interaction of the athletes and the coaches that the CASHA standards didn't really raise it? We were already above that. Is that accurate?
So specifically when it comes to practice, yes. For winter sports, we had taken it beyond what CASHA is asking us to do.
Okay.
In the fall, we were doing what CASHA asked us to do after working with our county health department, and then they also are having living documents. They've changed their standards throughout this semester, And with them now saying that everyone being in a mask prevents anyone from being considered a direct contact, we have required masks at all times in practices, even if you're in a practice situation or a scrimmage situation, which is when Keisha previously had said you do not have to have a mask on. So by requiring masks at all times, yes, we are going above Keisha standards, and by our county health department standards, that would prevent, if we're going to a staffing issue, that would prevent any coach from becoming a direct contact, and then not being able to teach in the building.
And then I would imagine for some sports, there's additional requirement or things that they're doing related to cleaning and that kind of stuff, which Keisha doesn't look like it covers.
Keisha has recommendations for cleaning, and we follow those. And our custodians and maintenance do a great job of cleaning our facilities nightly. We task even the teams to help clean at the end of practice. Now, there is a lot of data now showing that surface transmission is not a high rate of transmission for this virus, but we still take those precautions.
Okay.
So did that answer your question?
No, it does. And then, so do we have, are those things documented on a per sport basis to say, okay, this is, or is it, hey, the coaches and are doing it, but we don't have it? Because where I'm heading with this is there a possibility of, hey, if we have elevated standards, that could then be in a form that could be incorporated into a plan, right? Or reflected to where it's memorialized that way, that, hey, here is a documented approach or strategy, risk mitigation strategy.
Yeah.
Does it exist like that currently, or?
Yes, we put one together at the beginning of the school year. And I don't know if it was directly inputted into our reopening plan, but it was mentioned in our reopening plan. And so we do have a strategy for athletic practices and hosting events safely. We also have one together for Frontier League that we have put together. So yes, those documents exist.
Is it on a per sport basis? So, because, you know, there's, like, debate would be different than wrestling, right? I mean, there's a whole spectrum there of things that you would do based upon.
Right, as it applies to your activity.
Right.
Which is correct. But really, the largest factor right now is masks. Masks the entire time is the biggest mitigating factor that we are implementing.
Okay.
Almost every coach is a teacher, right?
Yes.
So, and if
we do have rule 10s, but yes,
sure,
most are teachers.
And if they were out on quarantine, they would still teach. They only wouldn't teach if they were out sick.
Correct. If they were remote, they would typically they have done their teaching responsibilities remote.
So how many kids approximately would be impacted academically if a coach was out sick? Approximately, just trying to get a gauge.
Well, again, if they were still teaching, it depends if they were actually sick.
If they were actually out sick, not quarantined, if they were actually out sick, couldn't teach.
If they were out sick and couldn't teach, then the kids, you know, in their sport, in their team, so 30 plus kids, and then, you know, whatever their teaching assignment, their rosters are throughout class day.
So spitball, how many kids might that be?
150.
Yeah, there you go.
We've yet to have one yet.
I understand that.
Right.
But if,
And again, I'd like to emphasize with masks, our county health department told us that they would not become a direct contact in a situation where we had a positive case on the team.
Understand.
but the answer to that, in my mind, varies if the school is in person or if the school is remote. Because if you, I mean, the majority, any person that I have known that has been positive for COVID, they don't have symptoms that put them in bed. So if you are a remote, if you're a coach and you do test positive for COVID and you're teaching remotely, and that is the case, then you can still do your job. You can still teach remotely because you're not having contact. That answer changes if you're in person because you can't go to the school. But
Understand.
Correct.
Just trying to get the details.
Although some would still teach remotely, even with a class in the classroom.
That has happened
Yes.
before.
Okay.
And where
So-
the teacher's remote, they teach to a class in person from home.
Yes.
So in those cases where we've had, because one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is, and I think we got a response back from Morgan Hunter today, is, you know, managing because our absentee rates for staff, I don't know if you got that forwarded, but the bands of absentees is actually a tighter band, has been historically, as far, for about every school. But our ability to, fill sub positions, we really kind of hit the wall earlier this month. And high school hit it first, but it didn't look like from the numbers that the elementary school was that far behind from hitting that. So what are your thoughts? So if the teachers are quarantined or remote, how did that play into that problem that we ran into earlier this month? Was it that those teachers that were absent weren't able to teach, or was it, or what caused that?
At the time, we were on site.
Right.
And so,
Even when they're teaching remotely, you still
have
need a
some
sub, and
right.
somebody has to be standing in front of
Right.
the kid.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's,
And that's right.
So that's where we.
Us being on site and needing someone in the class.
Yeah.
So when we had the need to go to remote, how many teachers that day did we lose?
5.
5.
we lost 5, but prior to that, we were already down 3 subs.
Yes.
Okay.
So that just put us over the top.
One other thing I would like to address, even if you guys have no questions, the form that was passed out, a waiver has been brought up several times tonight. We have put together a waiver that we would, if athletics are reinstated and Mr. Feldkamp's proposal is back tonight, then we would have all winter athletes sign with their parents and turn back into the high school office and we'd have on file. The waiver addresses 2 different areas. It addresses the acknowledgement of risk in choosing to be involved in an extracurricular activity right now during the pandemic. It also addresses a responsibility with the family to be upfront about any symptoms, be upfront about being tested or being in any gatherings, and putting the safety of the team and the school at the forefront of their decisions. And so it addresses both of those areas, an agreement to be upfront and honest about any symptoms, and then also that acknowledgement of risk of being involved in an extracurricular activity. On the flip side of that, one question that's been brought up quite a bit is if we reinstate athletics right now, what is our threshold? When would we say we need to suspend athletics? And I put something together and I talked to our coaches about it and we're in agreement that this is something that we could lean on. It's on the back of that page of the waiver. Is what our athletic suspension criteria is my proposal for us. And looking through that, what we state is that any team or practice group, and a team would be broken down into a varsity team, a JV team, a freshman team, a practice group could be a combination of them. Any team or practice group that experiences 3 positive cases within a 10-day period, at that point in time, high school administration would evaluate the need to suspend that team or practice group for 2 weeks from practice and or competition. Also, if we hit a 50% quarantine rate within that team or practice group, we would evaluate the need to suspend practice or competition for 2 weeks for that team or practice group. Also, if in the evaluation of an initial positive, so a first or second positive on a team or practice group, administration finds that our safety protocols are not being followed, masks are not being worn, then we could suspend that team or practice group for 2 weeks of competition or practice for not following our safety protocols. That would be my proposal for the board this evening, for our policy going forward, as to when we would shut down or suspend a team or practice group.
Has anyone looked at this? I mean, I know we got it from a variety of sources that have been, we don't really have, we rely pretty much on KSB legal. Has this been shared with them or?
This particular document hasn't been shared.
Well, this is adapted here. This is
Right.
us.
That's unique to us that we have put together.
Right.
Yes.
Are other schools using this form?
Yes.
It
Yes.
looks like Piper's, that's why I was
It's
asking.
similar to what other schools do.
McLeod's is
Yes.
similar.
Okay.
Yep.
See, from my perspective, I mean, the plan has always been fluid to the extent that information or risk mitigation procedures allow us to adapt the plan. And it's been pretty static since before we started school, right? And part of where we're caught in right now is, cause it's always been like, hey, we hit red at 15%. And, that's what the criteria called out for was remote and suspension of athletics. And we were going along really well at the low end of the yellow, and then within a 2-week period, we doubled. And the numbers keep changing because the data keeps flowing in. There's such a lag between when the tests are taken. It's anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, if not longer. Because even the last 2 weeks, November 16th and 23rd, those numbers have gone up because it was 15.89, now it's 16.45 from last week. And so it's good that it's down this week, but that may or may not stick. My concern is that we're sitting here we got into this spot because we thought at the time, it's like, well, we'll never hit 15. Then within a 2-week period, it happened. I think we need to be talking about this not in today's thoughts, but also so that, 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we aren't talking about this again, that we have an established criteria that understands that we could double again in 2 more weeks. And some of the testing data that's coming straight out of some of the hospitals indicates that we could be talking about a 40% rate. I mean, it could get that high. And then how are we adapting our policies and procedures to mitigate that risk? Because this waiver has a lot more weight to it if you can demonstrate that we are taking reasonable action to mitigate an environment with an increased risk. Because a waiver doesn't hold a whole lot of weight if you don't take responsibility to say, hey, I recognize there's a higher risk. Because of that, we are doing these additional things. And then we understand that we're doing our due diligence and meeting a standard of care. That's when a waiver like this has a lot more, I guess, has more meaning.
It does, you're right.
But I think we need to be thinking about in terms of not what a 16 or 15 or 14, but how would any modification to a plan now, what will happen if we hit 30, 35, whatever that number might end up being? And are we comfortable with it? Because we're kind of living in a new reality.
I think one thing to consider is, and Lauren and Tanya and Cody and I, we talked about the proposal and maybe looking at building numbers and not just relying on the community numbers. Because the community numbers, according to a lot of experts, aren't always reflective of what we see in our buildings. That doesn't mean that we're not going to get infections or we're going to have staff that we send out or students, but I'm a firm believer that all 3 of our buildings are doing very well, and it's not a good reflection to compare it to the county.
Well, the information though, what it says is that the community numbers definitely influence
Absolutely.
us, because we were, number one, the higher the community numbers, the harder it is to track how somebody got sick, right? So when the numbers were low, we could more easily determine, yes, they caught that outside of school, right? So and that was with all 3 schools, right? I mean, middle school had 0, in September, 0 in October, and then boom, 4 or was it 2? I think it was 2 in November, and then the elementary school and high school. Right, the faculty, because the faculty is the one that's, and this is just me talking, I mean, the faculty is the higher risk with regards to, the numbers, because I think that somebody's talked about, the age. I think the data pretty clearly shows that the students are at a lower risk, and the teachers, and if you have to quarantine students, you can quarantine students and keep the school operate. It's pretty tough to do that, especially in an environment where we have limited subs. So, but then as those numbers went up, our ability to determine whether or not they actually caught it outside of school, we're less certain about that, because if it's everywhere, you can't really tell where they got it for sure. So I would think that it's probably coming from outside, because we're following the same policies and procedures, but the likelihood of it spreading in school is higher the more people that you have sick.
I have a question. So, you're talking about the waiver, but the waiver applies only to sports. So, those sports, it's a parent and a student signing this waiver, and so really, whether the number is 15% or 75%, it doesn't really matter, because the coaches, the parent, and the student have to decide whether they are willing to take that risk, and they would be signing the waiver, and we should probably have some process where the coaches could communicate at whatever point they're uncomfortable. But the thing is that it's my belief that that's their right. This is not something you're not legally bound to go to basketball practice or to play a basketball game. You're not legally bound to wrestle or whatever. That's a choice you're making. It's an extracurricular activity. So whether, each family can make their decision on what gating criteria they're comfortable putting their child in. And
I agree with that completely.
So
where I'm coming from is, we also have to be comfortable that the risk profile that we're putting the staff in, that we're okay with that too. That we are effectively, we believe that we have a documented plan that recognizes the increased risk and has the policies and procedures incorporated, which it sounds like we're well on that way. And if we have then a criteria to determine whether or not the things are working, right? So that you have a measurement to say, hey, here we believe, because that's what we did day one. We said, hey, because there was a lot of mixed opinions about whether you go in person or not. And we looked at the risk. We said, hey, we want to do these things to mitigate that risk because we believe we can manage it. Here's how we're going to measure that. And we were right. We did the right thing. I think it's the same process now. Say, okay, we're now operating in an increased risk environment. Rather than, to me, in my mind, ignoring a plan isn't a plan. Updating a plan in a thoughtful way that recognizes increased risk, has policies and procedures in place that create accountability, they're measurable with regards to how successful they are, and that we can then track that and determine whether or not that's working or not. Because it's no different than what we did from the beginning. Now, because I am more focused on us being able to continue to effectively operate the school with that, and it's really focused on, are we going to put into place a system that really we think manages the risk to the coaches, right, or to the people that are involved, adults that are involved in those activities.
So my perspective when we think about the plan, the plan, while it was not perfect, and I think we all acknowledge the plan wasn't perfect, we found holes in it as the pandemic has evolved. It took us weeks and reams of paper to end up where we ended up. Certainly I don't think we need to have it take weeks to amend it this time. But the reality is we need a document that says here is the plan going forward. And the document should include things like a waiver if we think it's a waiver, and the suspension criteria if we think it's a suspension criteria. But I would argue that in the absence of that updated plan, we don't have anything to vote on tonight anyway, because in order to move forward responsibly, we got to have all these kind of things. And if they're not in a plan that we can all agree on and all bless and all vote on, then I don't think we have anything to vote on tonight, because to move forward without a fairly comprehensive plan, I think would be irresponsible. Now, one other thought, just from a perspective here. So I think the great thing about tonight is I think everybody in this room wants the same thing. We want every one of these kids back in school and back playing sports. You know, there is no debate from anyone that that's where we all want to end up. The main difference is one of timing. So I think it's great that we're starting from a place that we're also close together. My argument would be, you know, we'd originally said we wanted to see 2 weeks in yellow before we would revert back to the yellow gate. We've got 1 week today. That's great. That's positive news. Everybody, I'm excited about that. I think everybody else would be as well. If we had another yellow next Monday, none of this matters. We're back in, we had 2 weeks in yellow, we're back in yellow. We need to go update a plan anyway. So I would advocate that we update a plan, draft plan with things like this, that we see where the data points us next Monday. That's 1 week's worth of practice, and see where we end up. I don't think anyone is saying eliminate a season. We all want the same thing. I just don't think we have a plan to vote on tonight that I feel good about, that we could stand behind and say, we got a plan to follow. Because you gotta be able to administer the plan. And right now, we don't have that plan to administer.
I honestly don't know this. Because the current plan has a recommendation for that 2 weeks, and I don't know I disagree with what you're saying, Justin, but I also don't know what flexibility or discretion the administration has to work within that, well, what came out today, which was, it's below 15. And I'd have to read the language of the plan, but it's possible they might have the discretion to make that call without the 2 week. I don't know. That would require, I think, a vote if you wanted to change that depending on the wording of the plan. But to your point, I agree. I think you need to have something to vote on, an update to the plan.
Something to vote on that these guys can all administer. Because
right. Because the update that was sent out, you know, like we can't have. I mean, our goal from the beginning was to have a plan that you could say, you could input in, here's what's happening, and you could say, well, here's what the school will do. It's predictable, right? I don't think that requirement for the plan has changed. To me, because that just creates more ambiguity and anxiety in the community, because then they can't. I mean, I don't think anybody likes where we're at right now, but it was predictable. I mean, when the number hit it, that's what happened. That was the plan from day one. Now you go, hey, now that we've gotten here and we got here rather quickly, is there a way that we can mitigate that risk, adjust the plan so that we can keep doing what we know provides value at a level of risk that we feel is acceptable?
I think they've had some good questions and dialogue. I think kind of the intent was to let the administrators kind of walk through kind of their thoughts and proposals. Maybe let them get back on track and do that and save some of our questions. We've got some action items. I don't disagree with anything you said, and I appreciate the comments.
That's why you're sitting in that chair, man. You jumped in.
I'll be happy to hand this over to you at any time.
No, and I just asked Mark, I didn't know if Mark Altman had anything, he's representing the
I'd
middle
just
school.
like to let the board know that our middle school league has, our girls are missing the last 2 games of their season this week. The boys typically start practicing at the end of this week in previous years, but the league has decided to move the boys basketball season back a week. So none of the schools in the league are going to start until January 4th. So that's where we'll be. And I guess I just would like to thank all of you for all the consideration. I can't even imagine all the input you've gotten from people over this whole thing. And I know it's not an easy decision. I do know something I never thought I would see. We had a lot of kids Monday, Tuesday last week very nervous about not being able to come back to school. Kids want to be in school, and it's the best place for them. And, I don't envy your decision that you need to make, so, appreciate it.
I mean, I just might ask one, I mean, you know, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mark and Cody, but I mean, I do struggle a bit with this, that we're not putting extracurriculars ahead of academics. I mean, we had one speaker even mention about the elementary school. We have a whole, you know, we really didn't have any parents here, but there's probably a bigger population of parents with elementary kids that are being impacted by this, and they're not, I mean, there's not a lot of conversation about you getting back to school till January 4th. I mean, you know, you gave us some numbers on the kids participating in extracurricular activities, but there's 500 kids there, so there's 400 or so that aren't involved in anything and are having to go remote. I mean, I'm sure if you're in a welding class or something like that, there aren't any special accommodations being made for them. So I guess, you know, I struggle with trying to get to where you're saying that we're not putting athletics ahead of academics in this situation.
I mean, if you want me to speak to that, I would say we could. I mean, if we agree that bringing 20 to 30 kids on site is a risk that we are comfortable with, then we could look at letting a welding class bring in 20 kids to get into the shop and complete a project. We could look at art bringing in 15 kids to complete a piece of work they need to put in the kiln and can only do that at school. So that's not something that we have to ignore. If we say that we're comfortable with 20 to 30 kids coming to the building in a group, not intermixing with anybody else, and then leaving, and not going through the typical school day. So my response to that would be, why not? If we say athletics, if we're comfortable with that risk, we could be comfortable with some of those others as well.
And just so you know, that y'all remember, maybe we are bringing kids in for tutoring, for academic support. And it happens 3 days a week, and we're trying to provide that for them because we know they're struggling, we know they're gonna be struggling. A month ago, I stood here and told you 64% of our remote students were failing at least one class. Now we've got 100% of our kids at home, and they're gonna be struggling. So these are the kind of supports that we would love to provide, to continue to provide.
I got open for kids, I'll speak to you about it. I'm involved with the reading program in Kansas City, Missouri. You understand that by the third grade, if you're not capable of reading, you are more likely to end up in the prison system than not.
I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful, sir. We had a public comment portion, that's over. I mean, we're all in a difficult situation, so I hope you can respect the position we're in and the rules there of the board of directors.
Specifically athletic topic. Thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that, you know, when we first looked at the hybrid model and evaluated that as far as how workable that was, the big thing that came up was how effective would that be because of the additional burden it has on the family or we have internet connectivity. I mean, shoot, well, we have cell phone coverage issues in the county. I do think that we need to continue to really focus on the K through 5 for that reason, because as challenging it is for high school students, I think it's more challenging for the K through 5 in a remote only environment. Because I think we need to start thinking about talking about that now, because there's a real possibility that numbers keep going up. And how do we either do remote more effectively and address those concerns, or how do we operate at least to some degree in person and mitigate the risk?
Yeah, I don't disagree that there's a lot of things we need to address, and this has kind of grown.
We had a superintendent that put together a plan that I just don't understand, I guess, all of our discussion when he's got the thumb on what's happening at the school. He knows what's happening with athletics. He knows what's happening with the teachers. He knows what's happening with the students. why do we think we have any more knowledge than he does? Why are we not asking him to be able to?
So.
The recommendation 1 week ago was 180 degrees different, for the record.
But as things change,
I understand that.
I mean, nobody has a magic
Understand
crystal
that.
ball to understand what's gonna take place. And
I understand.
if you're not in the school, it's really hard to understand what's happening in the school. And so I think that's why we have to really look to the superintendent to give us that guidance, rather than us discussing it and coming up with our own ideas.
You know, Justin, one thing I would ask is, I agree with you 100% on the plan, that we've got to get working on it immediately to upgrade the reopening plan. But what I would ask is that to trust us, to let the kids go back to practice in their activities, and in the meantime, we will work on this from tomorrow morning to get this thing moving. I know that's just how I feel about it. And that's all. I would like for us to look at the recommendation.
Yeah.
And give me some of that leeway.
I mean, I think we did, and that's what we did on the 18th, and now we're back revisiting it. You know, I mean, I don't know if there's any other comments or updates from the administration, or board members have comments, or if not, we.
One other comment, Jim. I think that whether it's in this forum or Zoom or something, we all have a sense of urgency to get back to some sense of normalcy. So I think regardless of where we end up tonight, I think we probably need a weekly touch point from now until whenever normal is, to make sure that we are getting those recommendations, are evaluating the data, give the public an opportunity to hear the discussion. And I think we probably need a weekly touch point, maybe even just over Zoom for a little while, to make sure that we're showing the sense of urgency.
I'm not opposed to a weekly meeting. I mean, we've had multiple in the last 3 years. You know, I guess, I mean, I do feel a little bit better that the level is below 15, and it kind of gets us out of the red, well, albeit maybe temporarily. I think the plan is pretty ambiguous in terms of whether the 1 week or the 2 week.
I'm looking at it, I don't, see, to me, it's, the way it's set up is, there's flexibility for the administration to work with regards to both how quickly they implement the red when you're in the red, or move out of the red when you're out. I don't know that requires any action on the board, given what today's numbers are. But I do think there is an urgency to get the plan.
I agree 100%.
So I have 2 things to say. One, when we're talking about whether we're putting athletics before anything else, and I know, there were emails that we as board members got that said, academics first, you have to put academics first. But the reality is that when you go to call, you can call, well, I called the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I called their admissions. So I called them and I said, so my daughter can't get in this honors class that she needs to because of her schedule, so is that gonna hurt her admissions? And they said, no, it's not. We do not look at only academic classes and their grades. We look at the whole person. We look at how well-rounded you are. And you can search different articles, you can Google, the responsibilities of school boards. And it will say, on the same exact line, in the same sentence, it says school boards are responsible for, the facilities, the academics, the extracurriculars. It doesn't say, that school boards are responsible for academic, you know, science, math, all of that, and then secondary extracurricular activities. And the reality is, if you're a student in our district and you only focus on academics and you only go to school and you stop doing any extracurriculars so that you can focus all your time and energy to get the best grades in science and math and the core subjects, then when you go to an admissions office, you are a step down from somebody who got a lower grade in those classes but also did extracurricular activities. And that, to me, you know, I understand people are saying academics first, and you're putting sports over academics, but the reality is they're equal. You learn life lessons in both. You learn things that you need to be a successful person in this world in both. And the kids that are here, the kids that are not here, that are standing outside or watching from home, that are in our basketball, wrestling, and what am I missing?
Forensics, debate.
Forensics, debate, any extracurricular activities, they're not new to this. They didn't just say, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna join, I think I'll be on varsity basketball this year. They have always been a member of that. That's always been a part of their curriculum. And so, you know, as far as not, I guess I've said it before, I'm gonna say it again, because I really think that everything we talk to about boils down to this one thing. Do you as a board member think that you have the right to make that decision for the child and the parent, whether they participate in an extracurricular activity? Because the thing is that it's like, as far as the plan, we can make an amendment to the plan. It would simply just say that we amend the plan so that when we are in the red, we can participate, or we have the option to participate in extracurricular activities. Because right now it says that we don't, that you cannot. So we would just say tonight, we're going to amend the plan, and it says that we have the option when we're in the red to play in these particular, or to play or do extracurricular activities, and then they could participate. Because it's once again, like, I'll say it one more time and then I'll be quiet, but it is, extracurricular activities are a choice that a parent and a student make. They're a risk to be in any sport. That's why, I mean, I said this last board meeting. If you're a football player, you know there's an ambulance waiting right there, because that's a risky sport. Whatever, you know. But there's a lot of risk, and that is a choice that the parent and the student make. And I don't think that we have, as board members, have the right to take that from them. That's their choice.
Well, to a big extent, I agree with you. But if you say football, for example, but it's also the school's responsibility to make sure the equipment is in good condition, that the things work, that we have medical personnel there, you know, for the high school events, so that if something happens, we can handle it, right? So it's not just a, hey, is the parent okay with it? It's also a responsibility that the school has to make sure that there's a minimum threshold of risk mitigation put into place, that then we can communicate to the parent, here's what the risks are. If you're okay with this, then then it's your choice, right? But there is a minimum threat. It's like, yeah, they might choose to have the student play, but if we have substandard equipment that causes injury, then that's on us.
So the equipment, yes.
It's more of a metaphor than a reality, is what they're saying.
But once again, it's their choice. I can hear my husband in my head right now. He's like, he always says, I can't believe they need all this fancy stuff to play these sports. When I was in high school, I played baseball in my blue jeans. Define I understand.
Right, which is where we're at with regards to, okay, what is that standard? What is that threshold? As far as, so if you say, hey, everybody can play, then you go, okay, at what point, where is that? Because like I said, one of the very first things that we talked about back in August was, have a defined plan that can tell you, that you can say, okay, if these things happen, here is how the plan shows that we would, not just an open-ended, hey, we're gonna do it if we feel like it. It's a, here's what the risks are that we know today, here's how we're mitigating it, and if the conditions change, here's how we will adapt, right? And so that requirement that was set up at the beginning, in my mind, hasn't changed, and there's an avenue to do it. And I really like the fact that number one, we've already put in place, at least to some extent, procedures and practices, and I think I wrote it down. Over half the people talked about procedures, right? And we're already doing things above and beyond CASHA with regard to what they're doing. And so there's a due diligence that they're already doing. Document it, wrap it up, incorporate it into the plan. And at this point in time, I don't see any reason, like, the administration doesn't have the freedom, if they want to continue it this week, because you're in yellow, that they can do that. That gives you the opportunity to then do it the right way, so that then there's clarity with regards to how we're going to proceed.
Assuming, I mean, the same thing would follow if it's read next week, though.
Absolutely.
If we don't have new criteria developed.
Yeah, you have to have a
Approved.
meeting and then get it approved, and then it's by Zoom on it. Thursday
I don't think
night.
it works like that though, because Cody, you would have to cancel games, then reinstate the games, or it doesn't work that way. You actually have to be able to establish it out for a time period. You just can't come and go by the day or the week.
It's difficult. Right now, we have girls wrestling scheduled for Friday evening. We've got basketball at Lewisburg scheduled for Friday evening. And I've got to tell those ADs, I hope we can be there. But they've got officials scheduled, they've got workers scheduled, they're waiting on us.
Well, how
And so
does-
it is difficult to go back and forth.
How does the yellow on today, I don't
But
understand.
you were saying that they could go back this week, right? If we're on yellow, did you just say that they go back this week, or did I misunderstand?
Yeah.
So they
that's
go
fine.
back this week, but if we're red next week, then they're out. So then,
Unless you update.
Right, that's what I-
Unless you update.
Right.
Update this.
Which we wouldn't get all
Which is
right.
part of this, right? Which it sounds to me like we already have all the standards written down. I'm trying to figure out what takes a lot of time.
that's what I don't understand. I don't understand why we just don't follow the procedures and the recommendations that were put in front of us when the people that made this are the ones who know
What's the
what's happening.
recommendations? Well, I don't
You were
understand.
given a sheet of recommendations, and so I don't understand why we are having all this discussion when we were given these recommendations by people who are in the school, who understand exactly what's taking
But
place.
these recommendations don't include, does it? They don't
It's the
include
what,
this.
it's not the
They
how.
don't include any,
There's nothing about the how in this.
So I get
I
that
don't think
because
these recommendations follow the plan, except that we are in yellow today. If we were still in red, these wouldn't follow the plan. I mean, I guess I think that's where the board is conflicted, or at least personally I am. But I mean, we're technically in yellow now, is what Drew said, if they proceed, and if we have an updated plan next week, or before Monday, or whatever, that can be approved, and we're in that defines how we're gonna operate in red, and it can get approved, we could proceed in the red.
yeah, then the plan is updated with the strategy on how to address everything, and it's done the way that it was set out, right? I mean, I don't see any reason to deviate from the established approach.
we can make that happen.
But if the board, if the majority of the board voted to amend the plan so that when you're in red, it gives the option to play or do extracurricular activities, then you can do that. And that goes back to
But-
the ideology that goes back to the same thing, like
I need more
academics
detail.
and-
I mean, I need more detail and a commitment of what that plan is. I wanna know what the rules are. I'm not gonna open-endedly say, go do activities and we'll come up with our things. I mean, we
So
approved
then-
the plan at the beginning. I don't wanna just leave it vague.
Okay.
If people, I mean, what Drew said is there's gonna be some parameters. I think Cody They've defined some that their coaches are willing to do. But I mean, if we hit those criteria, we're not gonna be back in here going, well, we don't like those criteria. We're gonna re-amend the plan.
Well, okay, so it doesn't really matter for extracurricular activities what the criteria are. If you as a board member believe that you have the right to make the decision for the parent and for the child whether they can participate, yes, you need all the criteria that you want. You can define it for 5 hours.
No, I disagree. I have to protect I have to protect myself and the district from being sued and not following a defined plan. I mean, I feel like we can disagree.
But okay, so what liability is, like, what do you, I don't know. You have to explain that to me because I don't understand, because what I believe is that obviously, what I believe is I as a school board member cannot make the decision for the child or the student to participate in an extracurricular activity. End of story. There's nothing else to discuss. So if you're saying that there's other things because you think that you're thinking that my stance, that my belief on that means that we're putting the district out more liable, then explain that to me, because also you have every other school district that feels completely different than you two. They're not worried about that.
Many of them felt differently in August too. But we did what we did and it worked.
Okay, so no, just explain. I want to learn about this. So explain to me what you're saying.
Well, I'm not opposed to us operating in the red. I guess I want those criteria to find out what they truly are going to be. I mean, our job is to approve it is policy for the district. I mean, that's what we approve.
Can we agree that there's a greater risk now than there was before?
You're asking me personally?
Not for the kids.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
Not for the kids.
No, we can't agree that.
And I don't know that I disagree with you on that, which is this is why I'm asking about with regards to staff.
But I think
right?
if you have coaches.
What we have seen is 4 to 8 times higher rates of positives with staff. We know that. So there is an increased risk, whether it's from the community or maybe there is some that slipped in with regards to in-school transmission. We don't know. But you can't say that, hey, the risk is the same before as it was now. The community rates are 3, 4, 5 times higher than they were when we started. And we're seeing that in our numbers, and it's impacting the community and our ability to have subs. It is. So in an environment where the original plan was based upon a risk profile of what it was in August, and if the risk is higher now, if you say we're going to continue and just change the plan without addressing that increased risk and documenting how we're going to manage it, then you are putting yourself at risk lively that you were reckless in your approach.
But can't you just say that we will adopt this with
Because
information and that goes into the plan?
that assumes that you were meeting a standard of care, because you can say that, hey, I understand the risk for some risky activity, but if the other party to that document wasn't meeting a standard of care, that doesn't matter anyway.
Can I interrupt real quick? Coach Delch, you still here?
Yeah.
At practice, how many kids do you have there for wrestling practice? On the team, excuse me, on the team, how many wrestlers do you have? Boys, girls?
In total?
Yeah.
42.
How many groups are you using to get all those kids to practice?
3.
So we're breaking up 42 kids into 3 groups in practice. Coach, that's a nice mask you have on for boys wrestling, or for boys basketball. Did you just buy yourself one, or did you buy every kid on the team one?
About 30 of them spent $600.
We could go on, but my point is, we are going above and beyond to put those into place. And my next question would be, I would ask the board, what more, in all sincerity, what more do you want for us to put together as to when we would suspend athletics, to put more criteria than this? Because we have numbers, we have how many positives or what quarantine rate we'd have to hit on the team. We have a time frame for how long we would suspend it. I just want to know, because I'm willing to put into place whatever we need as quickly as we need it before next week.
How did we generate this?
These are numbers that I spoke with coaches on, and we came to an agreement on this. How I came to the 3 positive, I essentially said, we're gonna have a positive on a team. We already had it in girls wrestling. So to suspend a team for that, I think we've shown this year, would be irresponsible to tell a whole team they can't play because of 1 positive. A second positive, I think, would be a red flag for a lot of us. But again, there's a lot of circumstances to where you can have 2 positives that have come from outside sources on the team and really have not been impacted by the team. The third positive is the point where, as coaches and administration, we talk, that's where we really have to take a step back and say, okay, we need to suspend this and take a look at how this is correlated to practice, activity. And so that's where we came up with 3 positives. We just talked through it and said,
so what is the
3
league?
positives in a 10-day period, that's pretty good grounds to suspend activities in athletics.
Is this for TMS and?
So what?
It could be. It could be.
So what does the league look like? What are they doing?
So, well, the league has essentially said, if we're in school, or, well, right now the league has said we're gonna keep athletics going.
Full steam ahead.
So what?
Full steam ahead.
So there's one other school in our league that has said if we go remote, we would likely suspend athletics, and that's Paola. That's the only other school in our league that has said that. Every other school in our league has said, whether we're hybrid, remote, on-site, we are continuing with athletics.
Okay.
Hey,
What I don't know is if that, because right now they're right, you know, at least for Logan County, they're right at that. I don't know what their threshold is on how they would revisit that if the numbers. I think if we can get a plan in place that we can effectively manage at higher levels than even where we're at now, then we put ourselves into where we're not, where we're comfortable and we can monitor it later on in the season. Because right now we're at the, you know, we're at the beginning of things, right? So that if we can establish it so if it does continue to go up, and we can say, hey, the plan is working, then we don't have to have a gap then. Which I think matters more.
But what I'm understanding is this is our plan. For
That's
athletics.
my point.
For
It's
athletics.
athletically and for extracurricular activities.
But
this could be-
academics, we've got our other plan over here.
Yeah, that's my point, thank you. Yes,
I'm asking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that for extracurricular activities, I feel like I have put something in front of you guys that could be adopted in and become our plan for when we would suspend extracurricular activities. To move away from the gating criteria that's a community number and isn't necessarily reflective of what's happening in our building or on our teams.
What are your thoughts about tying in? Because I think the bigger risk is adults, right? That the lower risk is with the students, especially, you know, in middle school, you know, at those ages.
Agreed.
So, was there any discussion related to, is the 3 positives, is that just students, or is it coaches count the same as students, or is coaches count at a higher rate than?
That's not defined in here, but I would say if we have 3 positives, and I would stick to that. And a coach would be included in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cody, did you review this with your coaches too? Were all the coaches given this same information? They all thought it was good and they signed off on it? And
I have not reviewed it with every single sponsor or coach for a winter activity, but I could.
So is it fair, if we're gonna ask the kids, we should ask the coaches to sign these as well, to participate moving forward? I'm asking.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. For
I mean-
coaches to sign off also.
I think this criteria is good. It helps us get it more specific to the sport, our internal guidelines. I mean, I'm just seeing it here tonight. The only thing that crosses my mind is, I mean, is there a community you wouldn't go to because that community's got it so bad?
So,
I mean, instead of us relying on them, us setting a category that if you're so bad.
So currently I would say with no fans and no spectators until January 28th, I don't know if we need to consider that until January 28th, because Keisha has basically said, we're taking the community out of this.
It's
now,
about the kids, right?
Correct.
It's about the kids.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
So will the kids be wearing masks when they compete or no?
That is not something that we have said definitively. We are wearing masks at all times in practice, no matter what. Keisha has not said that you have to wear masks during competition. In our county, if we chose to wear masks and the other team didn't, it would not protect our athletes in the sense of becoming a direct contact.
So that would be something to talk with the other school to say, hey, because at that point in time, you are more at higher risk of triggering this.
We could mandate that as a school. When you come to our school to play, these are the requirements.
Yeah.
Our middle school league has adopted that everybody has to wear masks even when they're competing.
You know, the frustrating part is we are hanging our hats on one entity's recommendations, which would be our local health department. And we're all trying to be health experts, which we're not. But we heard from two folks in the healthcare field who are recommending both athletics and academics. Now I can understand if we hold off just a little bit on academics because that's bringing in a whole bunch of kids and adults to a small area within our classrooms. But with athletics, it's a small, and activities, it's a small cohort group that don't mix with, 500 other folks. I would hate for us to be judge and jury just basing our recommendations off of just the health department's recommendations when we've heard from our healthcare experts.
I think that's exactly what we're doing.
That means we need to update things and change.
In terms of extracurriculars, I feel we are going above and beyond. In terms of the waiver, I think we are doing things, procedures within our teams, within our groups, that show we're doing everything possible to mitigate the risk of this virus transmitting here. And I believe we have put something in front of you this evening that with your input, we could tweak if needed, but would give us criteria for extracurricular activities for when they could proceed and when they would need to be suspended. And it gives us a time frame and a data point for when we would do that.
Right.
And we would continue to work on defining this plan. We have to. And for both athletics and the academic piece, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, talking about prioritizing athletics, to me, it's like, I do prioritize academics at the highest level, because that's what we're required to do. However, that doesn't mean that you don't do something that provides value that is easier to do and less complex, which athletics, I think, falls, or I'll say this, it's activities, because am I right?
It's not correct. It's not just athletics. It's not just athletics.
Because I know where you're coming from, Kaya, about where your perspective, and I'm looking at it and come to the same conclusion, just a different way, right? I mean, if we can manage the risk, that doesn't mean that you don't do it, because academics is a big priority. It's you do what you can when you can.
So I want to clarify on, so from academic standpoint, whether you agree or disagree about the numbers at Tonganoxie, are we following the health department's guidelines for academics and bringing kids back to school?
Are we following the health departments?
Absolutely.
Their gating criteria obviously is different than what we're talking about tonight. I mean,
I understand that.
They have a recommendation.
I get that.
And they are saying that their recommendation is at 50% or above, that we should be remote.
Right.
And that
And we're going to stick with our 2-week plan.
I would like to, yes.
We've got to be 2 weeks of yellow before we would go back and consider in school. Is that right?
The reason I support the 2 weeks is because otherwise you're flipping, as Stephanie, you're flipping back and forth.
And we just had teachers spend all weekend.
Yeah, that's just a hard.
I'm just making sure that I don't get called to a special meeting to switch gears. I'm just trying to get
With
clarity.
the academic piece?
Absolutely.
No, I'm not.
I think we need to look at the academic piece also, because of what we're hearing from the CDC and Children's Mercy and all of our healthcare experts. I think we just need to re-examine it.
We got
You know,
to.
the health department developed their criteria a long time ago, and so much has changed with COVID. We really need to just take a look at all of it.
Well,
I would-
one
I
thing
guess
that we,
the administration's recommendation is still to continue through
Yes.
January
That
4th.
hasn't changed.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And obviously my recommendation for the activities is different.
Well, I would agree with Drew. I don't know why we even need to take action or why we even need to have a vote. You've got the authority to manage the plan.
That's what I would like to do.
We're not practicing.
no, you would be.
I would, I mean, my recommendation is to start practice and have activities, trust the
We
administration.
voted not to have athletics, though. But we voted not to have athletics in the
Right.
last meeting. So we have to vote
Yeah.
on that, I believe.
I mean,
We
I
didn't.
guess.
No, we didn't. We voted not to change the current plan.
Which,
That's what we voted on.
We
That's
didn't,
right.
we didn't vote, I mean, that's, I mean, yeah, I don't know if we're ready to move on to action items, we've had a lot of discussion, but, I mean, I was asked to call the meeting and ask for feedback on the agenda items and really didn't get any, so what's on there is kind of what I could scratch out in a quick amount of time, but I guess, I mean, the first item, we didn't vote, well, we voted all on the plan, but we didn't vote on the recommendation from last time. I guess I felt like with the staff's desire, concerns about January 4th, that I'd like to just go on record and vote for that as an action item if the board doesn't want to approve of that. I left room on here if we want to, you know, amend the plan. You know, there's been mixed things of, we gave Lauren authority to adjust the plan, follow the plan, and we're in yellow. I guess, you know, if we want to meet next week to confirm new gating criteria, I mean, I think maybe we need to approve something on that, but I mean, that's just my opinion on that. But I mean, if there's not any more discussion, I think we probably ought to just, we've all been here for about 2 hours. I mean, I don't know, we can move forward on the action items is what I would like to do, unless there's any other comments.
So, one more comment. I think while we're in yellow, Lauren does absolutely have the authority. Because the 2-week thing was kind of a guideline anyway. And I am open to thinking through what a new plan looks like. And this is a good start, but I don't think it's a plan. So I would be glad to come back when there is a plan and have that discussion. But that's why I can't support it tonight.
But Cody asked you what else needed to be in there. What else do you need in that, I guess, for his clarification?
for extracurricular.
Yeah, what else needs to be part of that? I don't understand.
Well, the original plan talked about what we do when people quarantine, what we do when they come out of quarantine. I think if we're gonna adjust the plan and have something that we can all stand behind, we need to go back through the plan, make sure it's all still valid. I think, frankly, I think we all need a little bit of time to absorb this. I think it needs to be one document that we can vote on and say, we like it or we don't like it. And I don't feel like we have that at this point. I'm open to the discussion. I think we need to have something that's comprehensive, and if we were ever called to the mat, we could say, we had a plan, we followed the plan. We changed the plan, we followed the plan.
So.
And
if
I
you
don't
just
think
go
we
down-
have it tonight.
Yeah, so if you just go down this, one is that you would have to have, you know, this, you know, this statement referenced in the plan, I think. So, you know, and it could be changed just, I think, pretty easily with TMS or THS, right?
Yep.
The second is make sure that the policies or the procedures that you're currently doing, which I understand are already documented, are just referenced back into the plan, so that it's an enforceable and it's, you know, seamless across, right? So you got that side of things. And I don't know, what else would there be? Because that's pretty much those two things. I just haven't seen any documentation about, you know, here's how we have things organized with regards to, you know, wrestling versus, you know, band. I mean, we have debate, we have basketball, we have all these different things about what we're doing there and mitigating that. I would like to have it almost broken out, here's the Acacia guidelines and here's what we're doing in addition to that, right? 'Cause that shows, that demonstrates an extra level of care with regards to how we're addressing the risk. So, that would be good to structure it in that way.
I got one last question. Who is tracking the data? Who's responsible for that?
The positives and all that.
For
The
buildings.
practice, the temperatures, I'm asking.
So we don't, we take temperatures, but we don't record it. We just make sure that they are clear to come in, which is what we're doing building-wide. When a student comes into a building, they have their temperature screened to make sure they do not have a fever, but we don't necessarily record that. That just shows that they're good in the building. So the same is happening for practice. Now, we have shifted that to once a day. So if a kid, if we were having school on site and a kid was clear to come in for the school day, they would be clear to go to practice without taking the temperature again.
Do we think the temperature taking is effective?
Well, we've been fortunate so far. We've never had a student yet with a temperature above 100.4.
How many temperatures?
We're about 27,000 and 0 on it. We're doing really well.
That's awesome.
We're mandated by that one by the governor, so I don't know.
Right, but it's just interesting that what we're, now, am I correct in saying that when we have had positives, it has been people misinterpreting symptoms, that they thought it was something else, they didn't know that and it doesn't present like a fever that often, or if it does, it's for such a short period of time.
Right. And it's been different depending on your age group. If it's a staff member, they may present differently than a student. The student may never present. And that's the tricky part of it.
Yeah.
Chris, did that answer your question fully?
Is there any other discussion
Yeah, we're good.
before we move into the action items? I mean, as we sit here, I'm trying to think through the action item 1. I mean, I guess
Thank you, guys.
I mean, I'm now hearing that, some, I guess, favorability that we're in the yellow, I mean, I guess the last recommendation actually read, it was because we were in the red, I guess, that, we were canceling athletics. Suspending, and it's extracurriculars.
I don't even know if we voted that. I think we voted that we weren't gonna modify the plan.
Yeah, the only thing we did on, so, I guess.
Is that accurate, Audra?
I made a motion to modify the plan
You were
so
actually-
that, what?
You were gonna cut it up.
No, I asked that the plan change so that the gating criteria, when we're in the red, that it gave us the possibility to do extracurricular activities. That was the motion.
Right, but then there was another vote that was after that.
No, you just
There was
voted.
only one.
Didn't we tabled something? Didn't we table something later that month?
Yeah, we did.
I'm not certain we need to take any confirmation of the prior, I mean, we've already approved the plan. And we have the and we have the remote learning recommendation, and we have the recommendation from tonight. I guess at this point, I would just move we table that item. I don't know if there's a
Table
second.
4.1, is
Yeah,
that what you're talking about?
yeah.
I'd second that.
It's been moved and second that we table action item 4.1. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion approved, 7-0. Kaya seconded that. Potential amendments to the USD 464 strategic reopening plan. I mean, we've had a lot of debate here. I guess I put this on the agenda to allow the board to make any recommendations tonight.
I make a motion to amend the strategic reopening plan to allow for extracurricular activities when we're in the red, and follow the recommendations of the superintendent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we
is there opportunity for discussion here?
Yes, discussion.
So, do we not feel like we need a documented plan to document everything? Okay.
I don't.
Can we adopt the recommendations on this plan that was presented and some thought went into, and
Well, I
if
think
it has
you
to
could
be-
add to her
Yes.
motion, I
Yes,
guess.
you can
Yeah.
move to amend, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, if you want to amend the motion.
I'd like to move, to amend the recommendation to add that there is, the criteria for extracurricular activities as well as athletic suspension criteria, and I also like the code of conduct. If we could add that, that would be great.
So we're gonna vote on something that we don't have in front of us. Just, I wanna make sure we're all on the same page.
We're gonna vote on the fact that we need to have these items to be polished up and included in our plan.
Well, I guess, I mean, I think to Justin's point is, do you want to see the final product, or are you are you wanting to, I guess?
Because we don't even
decide
have
on
to take
seeing-
action, right?
Yeah, but I would go back to the fact that we need to trust the administration on, and believe in the fact that they're going to have the right documents that we need, I think, to move forward with this.
Well, I think Karen has made a motion to amend Kaya's motion to adopt a variety of these documents. I might have you recite what exactly all those are.
I think it's important to know what the suspension criteria looks like. Even if it changes, we have something to go by instead of nothing. I think it's important to get some accountability.
Is that part of your motion? I mean,
I guess I don't know. Yeah, that's absolutely part of my motion. I think it's important to have if we move forward.
So I think to answer your question, he was wanting the specific documents added, so you.
and so we can be clear on what the amendment is.
Yeah, so what you're adding, in my understanding, is you'd like to add the Tonganoxie School District Extracurricular Activity Participation Agreement. You'd like to add the athletic suspension criteria, that's on the back. And then you'd like to add the code of conduct,
Correct.
which is, where?
It was mentioned earlier to have, you know, just a clear understanding of the code of conduct for the athletes. And you're right, we don't know what that looks like, so.
Isn't that kind of what this is, though? Isn't that the code of conduct? I mean, I kind of look at this as more of the code of conduct. If they agree to do these things,
I agree.
that's where I thought that was.
The waiver.
The waiver's like the code of conduct, all these items, I'm willing to agree that, like, all these should be the code of conduct, I thought.
Is there a second to Karen's motion?
I second it.
So it's been moved and seconded to amend the motion. Is there any other discussion?
So just one other clarification. So, Kaya, your motion was to allow activities and athletics in the red regardless of where the red goes. So effectively, we also need to update the gating criteria to not, there isn't a top end on red. I mean,
Yeah, the reason is, I mean, I've said this before, but the reason I feel that way is that on extracurricular activities that we don't need to, you know, follow the county gating criteria is that I do not believe that it's a board member's choice to choose whether a student plays a sport, or it should be the parent and the player that makes that decision on extracurricular activities, and that's why I don't care. Like, if it's 75% and I feel like I want to send my girl to basketball practice, I feel like that should be my choice. And that's why. Like, that, it all comes down to that for me.
I almost completely agree with you, but we have staff and other stakeholders that are part of the equation, but I almost agree with you.
Okay, so we can factor that in though. So we could get right? Can't you get, if there's staff, like right now I just know because they've all communicated with us that they're comfortable being in those environments, but you could, to satisfy that, could you do
But are we comfortable putting them in those environments?
Well, once
I mean-
again, it's an extracurricular activity, so they could,
Understand.
like, I mean, there has to be an easy way to address that, right? Like, you could,
I mean, to me, my only discussion on the motion is, I would be open to all these suggestions, but I guess I would like to see the written policy before I approve it. But, I mean,
I agree.
that's my opinion, and I don't know if there's any other discussion. I mean, so that's what's influencing my vote. If we want to amend it a different way after, this action item,
it's all written. What, like, you have it written in front of you,
Well,
so
I would-
what, you just
well, I
want.
think KSB should be, review the legal document.
Well, none of us are attorneys. I think adopting that without our
Well,
attorney.
okay, so then you can say that you wanna amend the motion, or I don't know the proper words, but you could say, contingent on the fact that this would be approved by the KSB attorney. So therefore, if that wasn't, like if we did, so like if majority vote, the motion was passed, and then KSB looks at this tomorrow and they said, no, this needs to be amended, then it could be amended and it would still, like the
Well,
end result is the same, we would just have to modify the document. But this is also something that other school districts have. Cody?
I
So-
guess, my proposal would be that, and I would move that we,
We have to vote on our motion first before you make a motion. Right?
well, we got an amendment to the, we have an amendment by Karen. I guess, I think first we would need to vote on the amendment. So, all in favor of the amendment? All opposed? The amendment fails. Now, it comes back to your motion to do sports in the red. I guess I would propose that we amend the motion incorporating the items that Karen did, subject to review by the board at a meeting next Monday night at 6 o'clock here.
But I don't think, if it's subject to that, then why wouldn't we review it next Monday night and then make a motion to bless this? Because effectively, we're still voting on a future that we haven't seen yet.
Because the reality is, based upon the current plan, is with the yellow, the administration has the flexibility to go ahead and put things in place for another week. They also have the flexibility to continue it for another week based upon the 2 weeks. They can extend it, they have that flexibility both now and next Monday.
What are you trying
I
to
guess I would ask if there's a second on my
See,
motion, which I
it just-
assume there won't be, on my amendment.
I did,
clarify that. What are you talking about?
Because that 2 weeks works in both directions, right? You have the flexibility to do it 1 week, hey, you can do it, or you can say, hey, when you have one red, that doesn't automatically trigger it, because you can go another week too. So there's all this urgency to get something passed, when in actuality, you have a 2-week window right here where everything can keep running, and we can have eyes on it, we can have everybody review it, look at it, and approve it, and 0 things change between now and 2 weeks from now.
Well, right now, they're not able to practice.
Yes, they are.
they haven't practiced since Thursday.
They have
They
games
just went
on
yellow
Friday.
today.
You went yellow
You went
tonight.
yellow today, so you can change it today, right?
Not if we use the 2 weeks.
But you have the flexibility on whether to do that. That's at your discretion.
Well, I would like to think that, but I don't think that's what we had thought.
You're kind of talking two sides there, because you're saying he has the flexibility, but then you're saying you also have 2 weeks to decide either way, so.
Yeah, because it's yellow today, there'll be another
If there
But
was
you're supposed to
another
wait
yellow.
2 weeks, you're supposed to have 2
Okay.
weeks of yellow is what we're.
Yeah, but there's a discretion with him, because at 2 weeks, the reason for that 2 weeks was for being able so that you didn't have the bouncing back and forth. That was the reason. There was no logistics reason, there was no other
But
reason.
now we're asking
Give
them to
the
bounce back and forth
flexibility.
though.
What if there was a motion, and I know we've got one on the table, so this is hypothetical. What if there was a motion that gave Lauren the authority to start sports back up, given the yellow today, and that we get back together next Monday to review a revised plan and approve whether we were gonna go forward or not?
Well, the problem, so.
I'm okay with that because, but it's still gonna throw everybody in limbo for another week.
Yeah,
See,
so.
the way it works is we could even go for 2 weeks.
I would,
Okay, here's the reality. If you are an athlete and it doesn't even matter what grade you're in, if you are an athlete and this is something that you want scholarships for, or this is something that makes you, like, whatever, all of the things that have been said 25,000 times, all of those things. So if this district is not going to allow these kids to play, if this board does not view this decision as something that a parent and a player should decide, and that should be their choice, then all of these people, they are going to make tough decisions. And those tough decisions are that they're going to do AAU. They're gonna buy property in another district, just like people did here because they were allowed to go to school and play sports. So if you say, okay, well, we're just gonna do this every week or every 2 weeks and we're gonna meet.
I don't think that's at all what we're saying. I think we absolutely wanna see closure. I think we wanna see what the document looks like. I think we wanna see a document that's gonna stand the test of time. We don't have to have another meeting like this to go through it. I also think that, you were talking about college admissions, and I agree with everything you said. Where I struggle is, no one that's in this room has said we're gonna shutter activities at Tonganoxie School District. We're saying there may be a week or 2 pause while we go figure this out. And my proposal would be we went in yellow today, we lost 1 day, we lost today. If we gave Lauren the ability, which I think he's already got, but we can reaffirm it, to move forward in yellow, and we agree that we meet next week and try to see if we can come up with a plan that we can all agree on that would stand the test of time.
what happens if we're in red next week?
It's another data point. I don't know. What if we're at 40%? What if we're at 0%?
It doesn't
I mean,
matter
the
because
point of
the
the plan
parents and the players
is
should
criteria
decide.
for in red, so if it's approved, you would be.
You're gonna have the authority to move
But
forward.
I don't understand what are you gonna bring to us that's any different than what we already have?
It would be polished.
Incorporated into the plan.
So-
I mean,
You're gonna let
Incorporate into the
KSB
plan we
look at
have.
it.
Oh, yeah.
I have
If
a
that's what
question.
you want me to do, but it's important, I think, that the people here tonight know that we're gonna be in activities following CASHA policies, which is basically, what's the moratorium? I can't even remember the date. January what?
It's December 23rd to January 4th. January 3rd, we start practicing.
But I just think that we need to give them the consistency that we are practicing and playing through December, and then that's gonna be reevaluated. Correct? Cody?
I think we would all like to give them that consistency. I would just like to see the written consolidated plan to feel comfortable with that. We all want the same thing here.
But I think we can do that, Justin. I think we can do that even before Monday.
So
Yeah.
that there's
Well, then set a
games.
timeline on it.
Yeah, give us,
If that's what we're asking, and I don't disagree with you, if that's what we're asking, was Thursday
yeah,
this week.
and we can zoom it.
Meet tomorrow.
Yeah,
I'm good.
right.
Might need a little more time, but
Okay.
yeah, but I agree.
I'm gonna give you a reasonable amount of time, but I could support what Justin's suggesting.
I,
I mean,
we can work on that as a team.
So point of order, there is a motion on the table.
it's been
Help me.
moved and seconded that we exclude extracurriculars from the plan. I think that's basically was your motion, correct?
Yes, I would like to, amend the reopening plan so that when we're in the red, we can have extracurricular activities.
Is there any other proposed amendments or discussion on that item?
I mean, yeah, I would just like to say that there are games. So there are games this coming Friday, and
If you let me make my motion, we can have those games. Withdraw your motion, let me make one.
okay, I withdraw my motion.
So the motion I would make is that we reaffirm Lauren's ability to administer the plan. We're in yellow. And that we reconvene this group at the earliest possible date to review a revised single document that would stand the test of time, and we could determine how far we would continue it and what the requirements around it might be. And this is getting kind of long-winded, I apologize. I would also say that we need to meet weekly until we're at such a point that we feel like we've reached a steady state. That would be my motion.
So then, can I modify the motion to clarify that earliest date is tomorrow at 6 p.m.?
You just said that.
I think it's
The earliest date possible.
He's
Like 6
administering
a.m.?
it, so get it. He has to tell you what it is.
Okay, good.
Is there a second to the motion from Justin?
I would second that.
Is there any further discussion on that? She withdrew her motion. Is there any discussion?
I was gonna say, state it briefly again though, what you're stating.
Do you have this
So-
on there?
I
Sorry.
don't know if I can restate
followed
it again
you.
exactly. but I would move that we reaffirm Lauren's authority to administer the plan in yellow, which would mean we could play sports while we're in yellow. So if we went back to red next week, we'd have a problem. I also believe that Lauren and the administrative team can put together a single document that we could approve at the earliest possible convenience, or approve or reject, but look at it the next possible convenience to say what would the go-forward plan be. And then I also think we ought to meet weekly until we reach a steady state. So 3 points.
So,
Any discussion? Chris seconded that motion
but you
originally.
can't, but that means that you can't, like you said, I have a motion that you can play sports on Friday. Okay, great, you can play sports on Friday, but then Monday you can't play sports.
Our
If we're
hope
in the
is that we
red.
have resolution
If-
to allow us
if
to
we don't-
continue in red.
You're right. If we don't have resolution by Monday and we were in red again, then we wouldn't be playing. But I'm hoping that we would have some agreeable resolution before then.
And I think that's achievable.
I feel that's reasonable as well, but, I mean, we need I don't know if there's any other discussion, otherwise I'm just gonna call for a vote. The motion is to reaffirm Lauren's authority. It's to meet as soon as possible with a written plan, to meet weekly going forward. I believe I captured everything there. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right. Motion carried. You got the authority to start practices tomorrow and play games this week. We're in yellow. And I guess let us know how soon we can get something put together to call another meeting, and we'll probably have to waive or notice a meeting so that we can do it as quickly as possible.
You want, again, would it be advisable to have, share that a little bit ahead of time? Let's just take a look at it, provide some
Oh, yeah.
input so that.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise you.
I mean, I will tell the board that I'm not gonna be, maybe I'll try to make myself accessible, but I will be out of town for the next few days, but that doesn't stop I mean, that's just me alone, so there's 5 of you. Item 4.3, I guess this is maybe more of a discussion item, but I put it on here as a potential action item in terms of whether the board had any appetite for encouraging mask mandate for the city and county areas, given the impact we're experiencing. I don't know, there's a variety of opinions. I just thought it was appropriate for them to at least raise the question. You know, I don't know if there's any discussion.
Well, my feeling on it is that it's not our obligation or responsibility to get involved on a city or county debate. Getting involved in the greater at-large debate is divisive and unproductive, and it's inappropriate for this, and it's inappropriate activity for the school board to even go there.
I think I agree, and I would actually move that we table that 4.3
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
To table it?
To table the
Yeah.
item. Motion carried. With that, this meeting is adjourned.